Hello, my name is Tim Sekundiak and I'm the founder and CEO of CorpGTM. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to identify and convert 30 to 40% in additional new business pipeline that is currently untouched by your in-house sales process. So the way this video is going to work, it's going to last about 20 minutes long, and what I'm going to do is really quickly, just for the first 15 seconds here, tell you who this is aimed at to save yourself the time of watching if this isn't relevant to you. And then I'm going to spend about 30 more seconds walking you through CorpGTM, who we are, what we do. And then after that, I'm going to go into the process and give you examples of how you should be implementing our approach into your business in order to achieve this goal here. So that being said, let's go ahead and talk about who this video is for. So this video is for small and mid-sized B2B technology companies, so scale up stage to mid-market. This essentially means that you're not a startup, i.e. you are not pre-revenue, you have an existing client base, an existing sales process, an existing approach to winning new business. You are not a referral-based business. So you should also have a sales function of some sort. So let's say 2 to 5 people, essentially a couple of people who are actively doing outreach for you. In terms of the persona, obviously aiming this at senior leaders, so C-suite leaders, CEOs, founders, co-founders, and also revenue and demand generation leaders and sales leaders, so marketing, sales, things like that. Anyone responsible for, like I said, demand gen, new business, and sales. Also important that you do have an existing client base, you have an ICP, you understand what your TAM, total addressable market is, what your ICP is, you have had history of being able to reach your ICP and to convert them, and like I said, you have an existing sales process, so this is not you starting from scratch to do outreach. Now, that being said, hopefully this will save you the next 20 minutes of me talking if this isn't relevant to you. But if it is, and you tick these boxes, then amazing, because I can't wait to show you what I'm about to show you. So let me give you, as promised, now a bit of background on CorpGTM, who we are, what we do. So CorpGTM is a growth partner helping B2B technology companies identify and capture pipeline that is untouched by the in-house sales process, right? So approximately 30 to 40% or over a third of pipeline opportunities are left on the table by traditional sales orgs and sales teams because they simply don't have the capacity, the know-how, and the know-how to effectively identify, segment, and convert their ICP at scale. And I'm going to go into here in a second what all of that means. But what we do is we work with our clients to build a technology-driven go-to-market process that runs concurrently to, not replaces your sales process, but runs concurrently to your existing sales function and help you maximize pipeline generation without having to grow your in-house sales team and spend loads of money on hires and get the same results. In essence, we build a process that allows you to get the most out of each of your sales reps or account executive or SDRs or BDRs, whatever you call them at your company, maximize their pipeline generation, right? By removing anything from their to-do and automating anything from their to-do that is not revenue driving activity. So I'm gonna tell you about that here in a second. Let me not get ahead of myself. So a bit more context on us. We've been operational since 2022. We've worked with over 24 B2B technology companies, and we also advise companies at some of the leading technology accelerators and incubators in the world, like I said, in an advisory capacity for their sales and go-to-market process. Now, what I'm going to do here in the next couple of slides is run you through what a typical sales process looks like in 2026, when this is being recorded, at a B2B technology company in that small or mid-market stage who is trying to grow, right? So it looks something like this, and I'm going to actually go ahead and switch over to my Lucid chart here and show you what this looks like and talk you through each of these steps and stages, right? So I'm going to start here on the left-hand side and kind of walk to the right. And just before I do that, I just want to paint the picture. So I'm going to be talking here about top of funnel sales only. This is not going to be referring to what happens after an initial introductory call gets booked in. or a demo if you're selling SaaS or software. This only focuses on the sourcing, qualification, and initial top of funnel outreach that you are doing up until a first time appointment or discovery call is booked. After that, this doesn't touch that stage at the moment. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. Now, when you're looking at top of funnel sales, really it's split into two parts, right? You've got sourcing and qualification, and you've got the actual outreach. So you've got sourcing here and list building and finding the leads, who to reach out to, and then actually reaching out to them, right? That's generally the two parts and how things are done. And within, again, I'm gonna start here on the left-hand side and walk you through. Within sourcing and qualification, i.e., identifying your prospects, you've generally got three lead sources or three pillars of where you're getting your outbound leads from, right? So these are cold, warm, and some kind of pipeline chasing or reactivation. So these are realistically your only sources of new business, of new revenue, right? So let me walk through each of them. Now, as you'll see here, they're also drawn in to this diagram by proportion as to how much of your percentage of your pipeline they normally cover and contribute to. As you can see, cold is by far the largest, just because that's normally how it's done, which I'll kind of explain in a second why that's good and bad. But yeah, let's start with cold. So cold normally refers to clients and prospects who have never ever heard of your company and they are completely unaware of your existence. And normally what happens with sales teams is the reps would use a software like Apollo or ZoomInfo or LinkedIn Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Premium, whatever you want to call it. And they would use their filtering functionality to put in the filters of their prospects that they want to reach out to, and then extract those prospects into a list and reach out to them, right? Now, the big thing that's happening here is that you are assuming that just because a prospect fits your ICP criteria, it means that they are automatically qualified to buy. And now I'll talk to you about here in a second why that's a, kind of a wrong assumption to make and why it's not enough to make that assumption, right? But that's kind of how most things get done initially. Use a software like Apollo, ZoomInfo, export prospects into a list, and kind of do it this way, right? Now, the problem with this approach is that, like I said, just because a prospect fits into your ICP criteria doesn't mean that they have a requirement and a need for your solution. So what ends up happening is that you end up with massive lists that your sales reps spend loads of time exporting and creating and building every week or month or however your, whatever your frequency is. And then they will go ahead and somehow reach out to them. And I'll talk to you about this here in a second, but I just want to run through the other two quickly, right? So cold we've covered. Second one is warm, right? And these are prospects who have somehow engaged with you or are somehow aware of your existence and have interacted with your company. Now, most of the time when we're talking about warm prospects, you're going to be looking at referrals, introductions, and your network, right? So whether this is you as the CEO having worked in the industry, previously in your career that you are now selling into, and you've got a network there. Maybe this is a referral from your investors. Maybe this is a referral to a client, from a client to another client. Although if you're selling software, that's probably not going to be happening because you're more often than not selling to competitors of each other, so they're not going to refer you to their competitor. But if your solution is more of like a service-based / software-based, then you might have some referrals like that. But realistically, what's going to be happening is, you've got your referrals from your network, investors, and maybe some past clients that are coming in. Maybe you've got an introducer who is working on like a commission only deal and sending you like 1 lead a month or something whenever they feel like it. Things like that, right? Those are obviously the highest converting prospects. They are going to do the best in terms of your results, but at the same time, they are also going to be the least scalable, and you're not going to be able to consistently expect them, right? That's the problem, right? Third thing here that we're looking at is your pipeline. So this is essentially what is called here pipeline chasing. Really, this should be called reactivation, but the reason we've called it chasing here is because it really gets done in a very manual way. Normally what happens, this normally is going to be made up of your demos that your sales reps have done but have gone nowhere, old deals that have been closed lost, people who have stopped replying, things like that. And normally what will happen is when a sales rep has a demo and they think that they've exhausted all of their objection handling capacity, they will then just mark that as closed lost and then put a note in HubSpot or Salesforce for themselves to check in in 3 months time or 6 months time and hope that something's changed for that prospect, right? So those are the kind of 3 main lead sources that are at the moment being extracted and then reached out to. And the issue here is that obviously it's a very, very manual process, especially when your reps are responsible for list building, which is not really an income producing or revenue driving activity. And same thing is when they're having to reach out to old deals. Obviously if your pipeline is small, then this section will also be small, because that feeds off each other. But essentially what happens is that, when you are relying on doing things this way, you aren't really qualifying leads and you're not really qualifying prospects. You're only assuming and extrapolating that they'll have the same issue that someone else who bought from you did, purely because of their title, position in a company, headcount, revenue, location, things like that, right? Now, what ends up happening, I'm just going to focus on this cold here because these two you can't really control, but what ends up happening when you extract cold leads in this way is that the leads are passed to your sales reps, passed to your AEs, whatever you want to call them, and that results in super, super high volume outreach, whether it's being done manually, which is obviously very time consuming, and again, quite low conversion, or if you're doing them semi-manually or automatically, if you're running a sequence, let's say in HubSpot or in somewhere else, and you're running some kind of campaign that will engage these people and get your messaging out to their email inbox. Again, that is what we like to call in the industry a spray and pray approach, because you are leading in with super, super low conversions, because this list here is only qualified based on the criteria, but no actual real intent and need. And that word intent, kind of keep that in the back of your mind, because I'm going to come back to that here in a second. It's very, very important. So like I said, what happens here is you have these prospects who get funneled into your outreach process, manual or semi-manual, via email, LinkedIn, or even calling. And then from there, a proportion of those people will book demos. Sales is a numbers game. It's an art and a science, but at the end of the day, volume will always be there. So if you reach out to enough people, you will get bookings. The issue though is that when you do get bookings, a lot of these calls are quite unqualified because there's no actual pain, there's no actual need. People are just booking meetings into their fact-finding meeting and understand more about your solution without really going into depth and without having any motivation for being there, right? And what does this lead to? Obviously leads to longer sales cycles, lower conversions, your team losing morale, spirit, etc., making less money, all those things that happen. But I'm just going to highlight this point again, right? That just because a prospect fits your TAM, total addressable market, or your ICP criteria, it doesn't mean that they're a qualified buyer and they have a need for your solution, right? So I've kind of painted this, gloomy picture here of how things are being done at the moment. If this is you, and if you're drawing some parallels to what the process looks like at your business right now, with your sales team, fear not, because I'm about to go ahead and show you how things should be done instead. And what I kind of want to introduce to you here is an approach that is reliant that leverages essentially the latest technology that we now have access to in 2026, that can allow you to see outsized results from your basically in-house sales function. In other words, maximize the results you're seeing and the ROI you're getting per your sales rep, because you are removing a lot of the manual things that they're doing in this process and also feeding them only the best of leads to reach out to manually, right? So what that process looks like is something like this. And I'm going to go ahead here and start from left to right and just kind of walk you through the whole thing again. So you've got also again here 2 parts, sourcing and outreach, right? So let's go ahead and start here with the, again, 3 lead sources that we're looking at. Now, the kind of key difference here is that although this is, also similar, you've got cold, warm, and you've got your reactivation as the previous approach. The difference here is that each of these are cross-checked for prospects and not only being relied on individually, right? And I'll kind of explain how that works in a second. But let's just talk through this really, really quickly. So you've got your cold prospects, right? How is this split up? So a portion of this is still going to be ICP based, your good old, Apollo or LinkedIn or ZoomInfo criteria based search that you're using to find out your ideal prospects. So that's still happening. The difference is that they're being qualified, and I'll talk to you about that in a second here. Right. Second thing here that a lot of companies just straight up aren't doing is lookalike audiences and utilizing lookalike software like Ocean, for example, to find companies at account level, but also at prospect level who are similar to existing or past clients that they've had. Right. So running lookalike audiences and then targeting them with very, very personalized campaigns as to why they are relevant. So that's the second one. Third one here is going to be signal based, right? So potentially, a good one to try always is when a company is hiring for a position that your product or solution, solves basically, right? That's normally a good thing to look at. Another thing is if they have intent somehow. So if they have somehow, searched or posted something online that mentions any keywords that your solution is relevant to and attached to, how are you identifying those prospects? How are you scraping online databases to find them and then reach out to them, right? So that touches on cold. The next thing I want to move on to is warm traffic. And this essentially is where it gets interesting, because this part is really not happening for the majority of scale up sales teams at the moment. The first thing here is you should be tracking and de-anonymizing and segmenting your website visitors, right? I can guarantee you that in the last 30 days, you probably had a couple of thousand website visits at the least, and about 10% of those people are going to be in your ICP and are going to be qualified buyers. But the problem is that you're just not seeing them right now because you don't have the capability to see them. And even if you are seeing them, you are not seeing them with the intent that they gave you. What that means is even if someone visits your website, engages with you, let's say for, over the last month, they've spent 7 minutes on your website and visited 12 pages, right, in total. Even if you do come across that lead in your, let's say, ICP search, which you most likely will, you won't know that they've also spent this time on your website. So when you reach out to them, you will just say, hey, John, I'm reaching out because da-da-da-da, but you won't actually hyper target them and say to them, hey, I saw you had a look at my website or at our website, are there any questions I could answer, etc. So you're not really, they're not talking to each other, these processes, right? The second thing here is inbound leads, right? So maybe you have some kind of lead magnet on your website where people can subscribe, put their email in and receive that lead magnet, right? How are you then, apart from putting them in a nurture campaign, how are you retargeting those prospects and reaching out to them proactively as well, right? Then we're moving on to social scraping, right? How are you identifying people who have engaged with you on your social media? It's such a powerful tool these days, right? Whether you're doing some kind of paid ad campaigns, whether you're bidding on keywords, buying Google ads, or you're running social ads on Meta, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., right? You should be reaching out to those people who engage with you, right? If you have, a company post that goes out on your company LinkedIn page and you get 50 likes, at least maybe 2 of those people are going to be relevant and in your ICP. How are you screening them and cross-checking them against all of this stuff and then reaching out to them with their intent signal based on how they've interacted with you, right? So all of these things are things that are just straight up not happening and are leaving a lot of pipeline on the table, and not because your sales team isn't good enough, but just because they're not given the right tools to see these things, right, and to act on them. Okay. The next thing here is you're looking at pipeline reactivation. Notice how here it's called reactivation instead of pipeline chasing. It's because this essentially refers to, yes, still the same lead source, closed lost deals, past demos, ghost prospects. Sure, it's still the same people, but now you're touching them in an automated campaign that identifies them again, screens them against each other, gives them a lead score, and then goes ahead and reaches out to them based on their lead score. And I'll kind of show you here on the right hand side in a second what that looks like, right? But essentially your sales reps are not just putting a task for themselves for 3 months to check in and doing it that way. Okay. So now that we've touched on the 3 lead sources, what actually happens when you are extracting these prospects from these lead sources? So what happens with the process that we build is we'll use a software like Clay to go ahead and put them into a table that allows us to qualify them, right? And allows us to, more importantly, give them a score by running them through an enrichment process that checks them up against each of these intent-based signals to give them, like I said, a lead score based on how hot or how warm or how engaged they are, right? After that, the prospect leads are enriched via over 50 providers, data providers that we have access to, and then after that they are added to your CRM and obviously owned by you. Whether they were already in your CRM, they are updated and enriched. If they weren't there, then obviously they get added, right? From here, what happens is that because this lead is given a score, let's call this score 1 to 10, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. They are then split into 2 or potentially even more categories, right? So let's assume, for example, leads that are below average, so 5 or below as a lead score. Your sales reps that you're paying, a salary, a base salary plus a commission to, that you've spent time recruiting and training, shouldn't be spending their time reaching out to prospects who have a low lead score and low intent scores, just because that's just going to result in the same thing as we saw up here, which is super big lists, low conversion rates, and just a lot of frustration, right? So what you should be doing is funneling these people into an automated outreach campaign via tools like SmartLead, HeyReach, Dripify, etc. That's going to touch these prospects with very personalized copy via email and LinkedIn. So it's a multi-channel approach. And then it's going to be able to book demos with 0 involvement from your sales team. Because these prospects who are, let's say, less engaged, you should still reach out to them. They're still in your ICP, they're still in your TAM, but you just shouldn't be spending team time on doing them, right? So the process we build allows you to target these people, and like I said, up until the demo is booked, doesn't require any involvement from your sales reps. It's all done, by our team and by the software, a combination of software. Then from there, what happens is if a lead scores above, let's say 5, and let's say is marked as a high intent lead, 2 things happen, right? The first thing that happens is that because they are now qualified and marked as high intent, we want to straight away run them through a software like Ocean to find more prospects like them. Again, this is using the same lookalike capability that I touched on earlier to identify more people like them, right? Now, that's not enough, because just because someone has the same characteristics as a high scoring lead doesn't mean they have intent, right? This is what I touched on earlier that's wrong with this process. Just because someone has the same criteria, filters as someone else, it doesn't mean they have the same pain point and problem, right, to an extent. So what you still want to be doing is when you find these lookalike leads, you still want to be running them through the whole process again and qualifying them based on their intent. And as you can see here, this kind of is a loop, so it kind of runs infinitely. Obviously not infinitely, but runs pretty consistently and gives you a high stream of qualified prospects that then your sales team can reach out to manually. And this brings me on to the last step of this process, which is the leads that are the highest intent and highest engagement levels should be being passed to your sales reps for manual touching via phone, email, LinkedIn, or even semi-manual. But the point is, these are the prospects that your expensive and highly trained sales reps should be spending their precious time to reach out to, right? From here, they can get driven to their, your typical sales process, and then they can book demos and progress those deals with them that way, right? So hopefully you can see how, I've color coded this chart here a little bit, because you can see how we've gone from this whole chart being basically blue, everything being done manually by your sales team and spending way too much time on things they shouldn't be, to everything here on the left-hand side being automated, and also some outreach as well being automated to allow your sales reps to basically receive a high quality and high stream list of qualified prospects straight into their, CRM list, or, however the handover process is going to work, which we can be flexible on, that they can then reach out to, right? So hopefully you can see how that takes back a lot of the time that they should not be spending on doing all of this stuff, and you should really be utilizing the latest technology, as of some of the software I've showed you here, to put this together and operate this. Now, if there's no know-how on your team that can support a process like this at the moment, then that's where we come in, and that's why I'm obviously reaching out to you today. So what we do is, like I said, we build a process like this for our clients. This is obviously just an example, but this is highly customizable to your specific requirements based on your ICP criteria, things like that. So I'm just going to flick over here into what I would like to suggest and offer you. So I would love to offer a complimentary, obviously a non-obligation review of your current outbound process over a quick call. So what we'll do is review whether your process looks more like this or more like this, and suggest key areas that you can optimize that will make an impact within the next month, or if you're watching this and it's the end of the month, and within the next 30 days. But you get the point I'm making. So you'll walk away from this call with understanding key gaps in your sales process and funnel, learning how to identify buyers that are engaged, have a high intent score, and are already looking for your solution. Obviously, how to automate, a vast majority, 90% of your sales team's non-revenue driving activities, and obviously, most importantly, how to unlock that additional 30 to 40% or even more potentially in new business pipeline that is currently being unseen and untouched and just straight up left on the table by your sales process because of the capacity and the know-how and the targeting restraints that are present. So go ahead and book some time in. There'll be a link below this video, either on the page or in the email I send you this. And I hope to speak with you soon, offer you some suggestions, and see whether there is scope for us to help you with this process. So like I said, hope to speak with you soon. Until then, all the best. Take care. Cheers. Bye.